This video was brought to you by Brilliant. On Monday, Ethiopia announced that it was signing a Memorandum of Understanding with the self-declared Republic of Somaliland, an autonomous but diplomatically isolated territory in northern Somalia. Now, this memorandum sees Ethiopia given a 50-year lease to the Berbera port, in exchange for tacit recognition of Somaliland and a stake in Ethiopian Airlines. Unsurprisingly, this didn't go down too well with Somalia, who convened an emergency cabinet meeting before describing the deal as a clear violation against Somalia's sovereignty and unity, and accusing Ethiopia of endangering the stability and peace of the region. Nonetheless, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has proved remarkably confrontational since coming to power in 2018, and warned last year that he was willing to essentially go to war for port access, which he apparently considers a matter of national security. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the unrecognized state of Somaliland, the deal between Somaliland and Ethiopia, and what might happen next. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So to understand this story, you need to know about two things: Somaliland and Ethiopia's ongoing search for a port on the Red Sea. Let's start with Somaliland. Now, we've actually done a video on Somaliland before, so if you want to know everything, then you can go and check that out. But the TLDR is that modern-day Somalia used to be split into two colonial territories: Italian Somaliland in the middle and British Somaliland in the northwest. Then in 1960, British Somaliland became the independent country of Somaliland and was then recognized by 35 other UN members. 5 days later, though, Italy gave up Italian Somaliland, and the two immediately united to become the Somali Republic, which is what we now call Somalia. In retrospect, this was probably a bit of a mistake from Somaliland's perspective. Italian Somaliland has a population roughly 8 times that of British Somaliland, and the north was often overlooked by the south. Somalia's first constitution, for example, only passed in 1961 because it had overwhelming support from the south. However, Somaliland got a chance for autonomy in 1991, when Somali dictator Siad Barre was overthrown by anti-government rebels, including the Somalia National Movement. Now, the Somalia National Movement were a northern paramilitary group, and after ousting Barre, they decided to declare Somaliland's independence, with basically the same borders as the British Protectorate of Somaliland. Then, in 2001, they held a referendum on independence, which was supported by 97% of Somaliland's citizens. Since then, Somaliland has been essentially an autonomous state outside of Somalia, a beacon of stability in a region otherwise beset by chaos. In fact, they've had 5 peaceful elections with 3 separate presidents, and in 2017, Freedom House ranked Somaliland as the only free country in East Africa. Now, the country is very poor, but they've got their own government, their own currency, passports, police force, license plates, and even a consulate in Washington. Unfortunately, despite this, Somaliland isn't recognized by either the UN or Somalia, who don't want to lose a significant fraction of their sovereign territory. Anyway, the other thing you need to know is about Ethiopia's ongoing pursuit for a Red Sea port. Again, we've done a video about this before, but the TLDR is that Ethiopia's political class has long been worried about the country's lack of port access, especially since Eritrea gained independence in 1993 and the Ethiopia-Eritrea War in 1998. Now, before 1993, Eritrea was a federalized part of Ethiopia, which meant that Ethiopia had access to the Red Sea, and the Assab port in the south of Eritrea accounted for something like 70% of all of Ethiopia's external trade. However, after Eritrea declared independence in 1993, Ethiopia became landlocked. Fortunately, though, relations were initially quite friendly, and Eritrea allowed Ethiopia to continue using its ports. However, the outbreak of war in 1998 over a disputed border region ruined these relationships, and Eritrea stopped allowing Ethiopia access to their ports. Ethiopia responded to this by signing a deal with Djibouti to use its main port of Djibouti, which now handles over 90% of Ethiopia's external trade. However, this has always been an imperfect solution, both because Ethiopia has to pay $1.5 billion a year in port fees, and because it made Ethiopia overly reliant on the port of Djibouti and the A1 motorway. And this issue became truly apparent during the Tigray War, when the Ethiopian government became anxious about Tigrayan rebels reaching and blockading the A1 highway. To reduce Ethiopia's reliance on Djibouti, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been trying to negotiate access to other Red Sea ports. In fact, his government is currently building a transport corridor to the Lamu port in Kenya, and restoring access to the Assab and Massawa ports was clearly a contributing factor to the peace deal that he signed with Eritrea in 2018. Unfortunately, though, neither of these efforts have really come to fruition. The Lamu transport corridor is still proving difficult, and after Abiy's recent peace deal with the Tigrayan rebels annoyed Eritrea's authoritarian leader, access to Eritrea's Red Sea ports now looks jeopardized. So, this is why, on Monday, Ethiopia and Somaliland announced that they'd signed an agreement granting Ethiopia a 50-year access lease to the Berbera port in western Somaliland. Now, this agreement gives Abiy the port access that he's been longing for, while also giving Somaliland at least tacit diplomatic recognition from the biggest country in the region, giving Somaliland a chance to truly begin overcoming its international isolation. Unsurprisingly, though, this sparked a furious reaction from Somalia, which described the agreement as null and void, accused Ethiopia of blatant disregard for international norms, and withdrew its ambassador. So, what's going to happen next? Well, this isn't actually the first time that this has all happened. Back in 2017, Ethiopia signed a watered-down version of the same agreement, which gave it a 19% stake in the Berbera port, but this fell through just a year later. It's possible then that nothing ends up coming from this most recent deal, but recent comments do suggest that Abiy is pretty set on getting a port, and the experience with the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam suggests that he's happy to upset his neighbours if he thinks it's in Ethiopia's national interests. For context, the GERD is a massive dam at the top of the Blue Nile that could supply electricity to 60% of Ethiopia's population, but it's staunchly opposed by both Egypt and Sudan, because they think it will mean less water flowing down the Nile to them. But Abiy has begun filling the reservoir anyway. Also, the rhetoric has been worryingly bellicose on both sides. On Tuesday, Somalia's President Mohamed warned that he would protect every inch of our sacred land. And last October, Abiy ominously warned that the country's lack of port access could fuel a future conflict. While an Ethiopian official told The Economist, if port access is not achieved by other means, war will be the way. While direct conflict might still be unlikely, this is overall yet more worrying news for a region beset by instability. As we step into 2024, many of us are contemplating our New Year's resolutions, always looking to improve ourselves and learn more about the world around us. And while our content is always a good starting point, a lot of the stuff we talk about can seem pretty complicated, especially when we dive into analytics and detailed data. But luckily, there's a fun and easy way to learn more, which doesn't cost thousands of dollars or take years and years of schooling. That's because Brilliant is the best way to learn maths, data science, and computer science interactively. And the good thing is that it doesn't take long to learn either. These complex topics are broken down into small but accessible chunks, designed around your busy schedule. Even just a few minutes a day can help you with accumulating new knowledge over time in a fun and engaging way. As time goes on, you'll get used to that empowering feeling of learning too, because Brilliant isn't just about memorization and lectures. Brilliant teaches you by doing, using active learning techniques to teach you the principles behind otherwise complex topics, and ensuring that you actually understand what's going on. So, whether you want to brush up on your basic math skills, improve your employment prospects, or just have another New Year's resolution for 2024, you can check out everything that Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days by going to brilliant.org/TLDR. Plus, the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support, and thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video.